All right, guys, welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. First of all, of course, a big Happy New Year. I can't believe it's 2024. So for all of you guys who've already started putting your comments and everything on the chat, that's great. We're just diving right in here. So let me just start by asking to make sure you guys can hear me okay. You guys can see me okay. So if one of you guys can pop that in the chat, and then we're going to dive right into all of the wonderful stuff. Some of the stuff that's going to be a little bit different, so to speak. Some of the stuff that's going to be a little bit different, so to speak, to talk about today is going into a little bit about the latest and greatest research that's going on, and I wanted to talk about changing the format up a little bit with you guys. The hope was, research changes so fast. The initial plan was really to start off doing these monthlies and kind of make it good for you guys, but what I wanted to do was present to you guys on a weekly basis and make these shorter. So plan was to do these every Friday, 30 minutes, make it short. This way I get your questions answered and I present to you guys the latest and greatest research that's happening that week. You get to hear about it and you get to take action on it. So with that, same thing format as always, I'm going to present you the research. I'll also take your questions at the same time. So let's go ahead and dive into the very first question or the very first research topic here. There's a new study. This is the EMPA-KIDNEY collaborative group study that was looking at Empagliflozin. And if you don't know about empagliflozin, this is an SGLT2 inhibitor, sodium glucose transporter. And what SGLT2s are responsible for is what they do inside your kidneys is they end up causing your kidneys to reabsorb about 80 to 90% of the sugar that goes through them. So 80 to 90% of the sugar that's being filtered through the kidneys ends up being reabsorbed because of these SGLT2 receptors. Now, SGLT2 inhibitors, drugs that end in flozins, like empagliflozin is one of them, they block that and they essentially cause you to spill lots of sugar into the urine. What's fascinating about these drugs, especially drugs like empagliflozin that was in this specific trial, is that they have a very powerful effect. So empagliflozin in this study, it reduced kidney function decline by 50% in the EMPA-KIDNEY trial versus placebo. This is very important and it's very powerful to understand. In addition to that, what they saw was that compared to placebo, as time went on, there was about an 18% difference in terms of the slope. So in other words, the slope of people not on an SGLT2 was much faster than the people who were on an SGLT2. So what's the bottom line to take home about SGLT2? If your nephrologist talks to you about putting you on an SGLT2 inhibitor, realize that these are very helpful in terms of lowering the risk of kidney function decline. So the next question that gets asked is, well, who are the right people for it? So it turns out that these are great for patients who are diabetic and have protein in the urine. That's what we started talking about in the past. But in this specific kidney study and in other kidney studies, what they also found was that the benefits of these drugs are also in patients who have no protein in the urine. So SGLT2 inhibitors like empagliflozin will help patients who have no protein in the urine, who have protein in the urine. Both of them will slow down the rate of decline in their kidney health. So in addition to doing all the things with your nutrition, with your sleep, with your exercise, SGLT2s like empagliflozin or Jardiance are another tool in your tool belt. Now, there are lots of other ones that are the flozins out there, but you want to know about these. Now, the next study, so this particular study, the EMPA-KIDNEY collaborative group, this is in Lancet Diabetes Endocrinology 2023. I'll leave the references in the video at the bottom so you guys can look at all of these studies for yourself moving forward and you can get an idea. Let's go on to the next study. So the next study talks about the idea of sleep and insulin resistance. When you have kidney disease, remember, what are the three biggest causes of kidney disease we've talked about? So if you've been coming on any of these sessions, you've already heard these a number of times, but the three biggest causes are high blood pressure, diabetes, and underneath both of those are obesity. So if you want to treat all three of these, you want to tackle your weight, your blood pressure, and your sugars. Well, the reason this matters so much and the reason you want to know about this stuff is because of the fact that sleep is highly linked to what happens in terms of insulin resistance, and you want to be able to treat and fight insulin resistance. So let's talk about a new study. This is from the Diabetes Care Journal. This is coming from 2024, just got published. So what were they looking at? Here, what they were talking about was they wanted to see what are the effects of essentially having chronic insufficient sleep. And I'll give you the definition of insufficient sleep in a second. But what happens if you don't sleep enough, and how does it affect things like sugar metabolism in pre and post-menopausal women? And how does that become a take-home message for all of you? So in this particular study, they have 38 women. Ages are 20 to 75. They're getting about 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night on average. So what's considered optimal sleep? 7 to 9 hours of sleep if you're an adult. Okay, 38 women in this study. This is a randomized crossover study. It's got 2 6-week phases. Now, once again, why is this study strong? It's because of the fact that it's randomized and it's crossover. So what happened in this particular study? They took these patients who were getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep. They reduced their sleep time by about 1.34 hours on average. So they got them down to close to about 6 hours, 6.2 hours of sleep versus the control, which was getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep. And what they found was that the patients who got less than 7 hours of sleep, they started to develop insulin resistance. And there's a very simple way and a validated way we can measure this, which is called HOMA-IR. And the way it works is if it's less than 1, you're insulin sensitive. If it's greater than 1.9, you have insulin resistance. And if it's greater than 2.9, you have significant insulin resistance. So what they found was that overall, less than 7 hours of sleep, specifically around 6 hours of sleep, increased insulin resistance. And this effect was most pronounced in post-menopausal women. So if you're post-menopausal and you're not sleeping enough, your risk of insulin resistance gets magnified even more. Now, coming back to the questions, let's take a look over here. Somebody asked the question, is it also beneficial with ischemic nephropathy? And this was a question going back to the SGLT2s of Jardiance. So the answer is, if there is damage and the kidney is working harder, this will slow down the inflammatory impacts going on. So going back to the Jardiance issue, the answer is yes. Let's see, Lucy asked the question. Lucy says, hi, Dr. Hashmi, I started listening to you because of your plant-based videos. Thank you, Lucy. Don't have anything wrong with my kidneys except have one that's 1/3 the size of the other and might have an autoimmune disease. So great thing for everybody to learn is what happens if one of your kidneys is different than the other ones. Sometimes we're born that way, meaning that the blood supply to that one kidney has been reduced, and that may have been from birth, or there was a narrowing. Now, there could be because there's cholesterol or plaques in there that narrowed it. Could have been because there was an embolic event or something else that happened, and because of that, it affected the kidney inside it, and that could have done it. And then the second portion of that is the autoimmune part. Autoimmune is where your own soldiers basically start to turn against yourself. And we don't quite understand, but we know that if that's going on, we try to lower your immune system so that it's not too hyperactive. But for those folks, stress, sleep, and diet are absolutely critical, as is exercise. So keep that in mind, Lucy, that all those lifestyle things are even more critical for you than ever before. You may or may not know this, Lucy. My wife has lupus. My entire journey into studying nutrition, lifestyle started because of the fact that she has lupus. And, we were told that she wouldn't survive. And we're blessed to say my older daughter is 11, my younger daughter is 6. We were told we would never have kids. So never say never. And there's beauty and there's hope in the world. And when you're dealing with one kidney being smaller, it does not mean you're going to have any issues. If you're doing fine, your blood tests are okay, your urine tests are okay, you're fine. Just remember, weight, blood pressure, and sugar are the 3 biggest things to worry about. Now, I think it's Healerka, or is Healer, CA as in California or Canada? I say California because I'm in California. But obesity, yeah, so the reason obesity is such a big deal in terms of kidney disease, and of course every other disease, is obesity causes inflammation. If you think about your car, the more weight you put on your car, the more you drive every single part of the car, it breaks down faster. It's the same thing. There is inflammation all throughout the body because of obesity. Obesity creates this inflammatory cascade. It changes all the bacteria inside your gut. As a result, there's a much higher risk for things like cancer and all sorts of bad things going on. So the damage that can occur from obesity is so many different things. Fatty liver, which may be what you might have meant to say, fatty liver is just one small aspect of that. But fat can, yes, deposit in the kidney, deposit in the heart, and all sorts of other places. But the fat itself is active and it does so much damage. And that's why when we come back to this idea of sleep is so important. So this study that we're talking about with sleep and insulin resistance, just keep that in mind. You want to make sure that you get good sleep hygiene. Go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time. If you're struggling to fall asleep, still get out of bed at the same time every single day, because if you do that, you're going to work backwards to fix your sleep. So in other words, one of the mistakes people make is, I was up until 2, 3 a.m., so let me sleep in until 9, 10 a.m. because I didn't sleep. No. If you get up at 7 a.m., I still want you to get up at 7 a.m. so that your body will keep trying to adjust backwards. I know the next day is going to be tough, but even then, we're going to work to make sure that your circadian clock is trying to reset. All right, let's go back and let's see. D. Dutton, Ladybug. Questions over there. Okay, Din asked the question, hi doctor, I'm from Toronto, Canada. Hi Din. My biopsy with MES score C, M1E0, S1T2C0 with 8 of 15 glomerular sclerosed, okay, with 1.57 grams of protein leakage, non-diabetic but moderate blood pressure, AKI. So yeah, so this is interesting. Well, first of all, I always have to give the disclaimer, I can't give personalized advice. No doctor on the internet ever should. You should not take anybody's advice to be personalized to you. Anybody who does that, they are not practicing good medicine. So this is general advice. Now, that being the case, what we want to know, the first thing is if you're having 1.57 and there's some scarring going on, what do all the markers show and what does the path come back as? Is it just because it's scarring and it's looking like more like just hypertensive nephrosclerosis or scarring from blood pressure and that's the underlying cause? Or is there something else that's behind this that's causing this and we want to know about it? With blood pressure, I think you have an opportunity to make the blood pressure better. I don't know what your weight is, but you can certainly make the weight better, making sure the protein goes down in terms of your diet by using more of a plant-based diet predominantly. That's going to help. Using, a plant-based diet is more alkaline. It changes the gut microbiome. It's healthy overall. If you're somebody who can't go 100%, don't go 100%. Do what you can because it definitely makes a difference. Lucy asked the question, I think it was reflux from, Lucy was coming back to the point of why her kidney was smaller. Yeah, Lucy, that's one of the most common things is where people might have reflux and they might not have caught it, and as a result of that, that has caused the kidney to shrink. Absolutely, we see that a lot. All right, let's go to the next study for you guys. So this is about the discovery of a new protein that's involved in metabolic disease. And it's very interesting because the next step to this study is going to be looking at molecules and testing them out in bigger clinical studies to see if we can actually come up with something exciting. So here we go. So what they were basically looking at was they know that when you have excess weight and you have people getting older, both of these conditions, they end up creating reactive oxygen species. And as these reactive oxygen species increase, there's a protein that they've identified. They call this protein the ZAK alpha protein. And what the ZAK alpha protein does is this protein, it essentially turns on insulin resistance. It causes fat to accumulate in the liver, and it causes your brown fat. Remember, brown fat is the healthy fat. It turns it into white fat. How do we know? So the study is in Science 2023, just got published last year. What they did was they actually deactivated this protein, the ZAK alpha protein, in mice. And when they deactivated, the mice became healthy. They became more active. They started running around more. They started having stronger muscles. And not only did they not get any insulin resistance, they also didn't get any fatty liver. So the reason this is so exciting for all of us is because for some of us, it's very difficult to be able to go out and exercise. We may have diseases, conditions, etc. But if there's a molecule that can aid us, especially for patients who are older, we talked about aging, how aging can lead to all sorts of reactive oxygen species. So if there's a molecule that can aid us in becoming healthier, how cool is that? So I'll keep you guys posted on what happens with ZAK alpha. This is a very, very early and novel discovery, but it is so exciting to hear that there's a possibility of finally identifying a way to be able to turn off the entire metabolic syndrome in its tracks. And so that's really, really cool. All right, let's take a look at the questions before I come back and dive back into the next research topic. Okay, and you know, one of the things I love about our community that's been building here is the fact that you guys are helping each other, sharing your experiences with each other in the chat, and giving each other hope. I absolutely love that. So thank you so much for all of you guys who share your experiences, share what's going on with all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because I tell you, at the end of the day, you know, look, information is information, but human kindness, there's something absolutely beautiful about human kindness. All right, let's talk about GLP-1s. As you know, GLP-1s are all the craze. So the three areas that I do research in are kidney health, are weight loss, and longevity. Those are my three areas that I work in, I see patients in, and so forth. So in weight loss, as you know, GLP-1s are all the rage. You might have heard of names like Ozempic, Wegovy, Saxenda, Zepbound, that's the latest kid on the block. And the question has always been is, when you use a GLP-1 receptor agonist, do they improve your insulin resistance because of the fact that you lose weight? Or is there something special about GLP-1 receptor agonists themselves? And we haven't answered that question fully yet. A lot of us, including myself for a while, said, look, it's the weight loss. It's the weight loss that's causing all these benefits. Well, this is a very interesting study. This is coming from just got published once again 2023. And so in this particular study, what they did was they looked at 80 individuals. They randomized them. Anytime you want to look at a quality study, look for randomization. That's very important. They did 14 weeks was the total duration of the study. They gave him a GLP-1 receptor agonist called Liraglutide. Liraglutide has a couple of names you might have heard of. It's called Victoza, which is for diabetes, or Saxenda, which is for weight loss. Or they gave him a DPP4 inhibitor, which in this case was sitagliptin. Now, what's the difference between GLP-1 receptor agonists versus a DPP4? GLP-1 receptor agonists, they act at the receptor. So essentially what they're doing is they're increasing the effects of the GLP-1s right where they're supposed to act. DPP4s, what they do is they prevent the breakdown of the GLP-1 that's naturally in your body. So in essence, because they're preventing their breakdown, you're going to have more GLP-1 floating around. So this is really interesting. If it turns out that DPP4 is better, then it's because you just got more GLP. If it turns out it's because we gave them the external injections with the liraglutide, it's because there's something very neat about these drugs. But they had a third arm, and the third arm is the most important because what they wanted to show was, well, what happens if I just put you on a low-calorie diet, right? Is it all because it's just weight loss? So this is a great study because it looks at all three conditions. And so they did that, and then in order to prove that this, whatever the case is, they used a GLP-1 receptor antagonist to block the effects of a GLP-1, because if you get all these miraculous effects with GLP and you truly think that the GLP-1 is doing these great things, if you give a blocker, those benefits should go away. Okay, now we have the foundation, so let's see what happens. So what happened here was they gave liraglutide, which is the GLP-1 receptor agonist, and what they found was that the insulin resistance went away. The insulin sensitivity improved. The sugars after eating a meal improved, and it improved very, very quickly. And so the thing that's important to understand there is that both of those things got better very quickly, and they happened within the first couple of weeks, so early that there wasn't even a chance to have weight loss yet. So in other words, the GLP-1 receptors are doing something very interesting. And then they gave them the GLP-1 receptor blocker, the Exendin, and what they found was the insulin resistance came right back. So another one, this GLP-1 receptor are actually doing something very cool. Now, they didn't see any of this effects with a low-calorie diet or with the DPP4 inhibitors. So this part becomes very, very important and very, very interesting to understand. So what's the bottom line? These new drugs, liraglutide, the semaglutides, and all these other names, tirzepatides, etc., there's some very interesting things. Now, there's a lot of side effects we've talked about already in the past. There's a lot of concerns we still need to know, but keep in mind, some of the stuff that's very interesting that's coming up in the literature, it'll be interesting and unique to see how we can start to apply it in the kidney world along with a healthy diet. It doesn't mean that drugs are the greatest thing. What it means is you want to understand the pros and the cons of everything, so you have all the tools to make the best decision for your life. All right, and then the final study for tonight is about meal timing. So this is a study got published in Nature Communications, got published recently, 2023, and it talks about what happens if you eat later in the evening or if you eat breakfast later in the day. So a lot of people do time-restricted eating. They talk about the fact that they don't eat their breakfast until noon. That's how they end up doing their fasting. And so people think that's awesome. But if you have listened to the stuff that I've talked about in the past, I've told everyone, you always want to follow the sun. The sun is your friend. Follow the biological clock that you have, not some guru on the internet. Never trust anybody, present company included. Just because I say something doesn't make it true. I give you the references, you look at it yourself. Okay, so in this particular study, they looked at 103,000 participants. Average age was about 42.6. They used dietary recall. This is part of the NutriNet Sante cohort. They had a follow-up of about 7.2 years. Now, what they found was that starting for breakfast, for each hour the first meal of the day was delayed. So in other words, instead of having breakfast at 8 a.m., you had breakfast at 9 a.m. The overall risk of a cardiovascular event occurring increased by 6%. Overall cardiovascular event occurring increased by 6%. On the flip side, eating after 9 p.m. increased the risk for things like a cerebrovascular event like stroke by 28% when you compare to those who stopped eating by 8 p.m. In my clinic, what I run for my weight loss clinic, what I tell my patients is it's really important if you're not an insulin-dependent diabetic or somebody who's pregnant or other conditions where they have to eat frequently, but for all other average people who are able to do this, to really try to stop eating 4 hours before going to bed. That's a great rule of thumb to try to follow if you can. But essentially what they found here was that if you ate after 8 p.m., it really had a significant impact on your overall health. So in other words, this idea is that the less you do eating earlier, the better it is. How much better? Well, each additional hour of nighttime fasting that you did had a 7% lower risk of cerebrovascular disease. So in other words, you lowered your risk for things like stroke by about 7% for every hour. So if instead of 8 p.m., you stop eating by 7, that's 7%. 6, that's another 7%. So take-home message there is, if you're looking at how you eat at home, try to stop eating earlier. When the sun goes down, you really ought to stop eating as much as possible. Okay, going back to the comments real quickly. Let's see. Oh, Din asked, she is in Toronto, Canada, and she wants to get an appointment with me. Din, the challenge over there is it's a little bit hard. I work for a organization that, sees their own patients and so forth. So that's always difficult going on. But I would say is take the knowledge that you get and apply it and talk to your doctor about it. If you have questions, I can always give you general advice over here. You're going to see that we're over here. We're able to talk to you guys in terms of happy to give you direction and so forth. Other question was, yeah, Barbara, same exact thing is, this is really just to have a way for you guys to get help. You guys have heard my story when I was coming up and, I lost my sister to epilepsy, and it was very difficult because she didn't get the care and there wasn't anybody I could turn to say, hey, is she doing the right stuff? How do we prevent other seizures? And she died and I wasn't able to help revive her. And so this is why we do what we do, and this is why I do this service for you guys. But it's very difficult to do telemedicine or do consults, because of my work, which is not related to anything I do on this show. And then let's see, Din said, why is there a risk of developing UTI and fungal infections with SGLT2, and how do you overcome them? So Din, we talked about this before in some of the previous live episodes where the SGLT2 side effects of urinary tract infections and fungal infections are very serious because you're putting out sugar into the urine. So sugar feeds bacteria, feeds fungal. Keep that in mind. You're giving bacteria and fungal exactly what they need to grow and thrive. And that's exactly what they're going to do. So this is why you have to be extra careful. So how do you prevent infections? You got to make sure, remember, you don't drink from a pond. You drink from a stream, because in a pond, bacteria will grow. In a stream, they have a hard time growing. So same thing here. You want to make sure that you don't hold your pee, especially when you're on SGLT2s, because if you hold it, you will allow bacteria to accumulate. There's lots of things you can do is don't wear tight clothing, right? So that there isn't a lot of moisture down there, so forth. Take regular showers, keep that area dry, clean. Make sure you're emptying your bladder every few hours. You're hydrating regularly throughout the day so that there's a stream, not a pond. And then the question was, what is the mechanism in terms of meal timing? So remember, when you eat, later in the evening. You spend more time trying to digest the food, and as a result of it, you're not getting that deep, restful sleep that you want to get, and you need that deep quality of sleep. When you don't get that, you actually have more inflammation that ends up being created. So keep that in mind, is we're trying to lower inflammation. Lower inflammation requires deep, restful sleep, so you get that stage 4 sleep, you get that REM sleep. So those are the things that become very important overall for you. That's why. All right, so in terms of moving forward, guys, the plan is going to be is every Friday for 30 minutes, we're going to do this live. It's a nice, quick way for you guys to get together with me. As you know, little by little, I've been messing around with technology. I'm not the technology expert, so thank you for bearing with me. I'm trying OBS Studio for the very first time because last time, as you guys remember, I was trying Riverside. That wasn't working so well. I tried all sorts of different things, and now I think we have a system that works with OBS. So we'll continue to use this. And then please, if you would be so kind, spread the word. If you guys find this helpful, I would really, really appreciate it as far as that goes. And then in terms of Ramadan coming up, as far as that goes, for dehydration, remember, the big stuff is if your health is in jeopardy, you are absolutely okay to not fast. Just keep that in mind, okay? So if you're worried about that, you do not have to fast, especially if there's significant electrolyte issues. It's perfectly okay. I have a number of patients who are Muslim. They don't fast. They understand. They give to charity, and that's always good. There are so many people suffering across the world. And there are so many ways for us to be able to do the right thing in the eyes of God and help people. So don't feel bad about that. And then in terms of question about kidney biopsy, somebody said, yeah, so remember, the only way to know what's going on is if you do a kidney biopsy. The bleeding risk is small, but the problem is if you don't do the biopsy, you won't know what the diagnosis is. And if you just take steroids, you will mask the underlying condition. There's no guarantee way to prevent bleeding, so I could never say there's zero risk. But this is where your age matters. It's important to understand, you know, platelets, if they're less than 50,000, we don't do the biopsy, right? So there's so many things that go into account, but the benefit of knowing is even if the kidneys go all the way down and you need a transplant, it's important to know what caused it so you don't end up losing the transplant kidney either. And then the last thing I just want to say to everybody is thank you for your support. This channel wouldn't be where it's at without you guys. It's growing. I can't believe I have 10 million views. I'm this little kid who grew up in a village and there's 10 million views, 10 million times videos have been watched. It's insane. And we have 65,000 subscribers. That's insane. So I'm very, very grateful to all of you guys. Please, you'd be so kind. Just spread the word. I try my best. If I make mistakes, I'm very, very sorry. I will see you guys next Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific time to 5:30. If you have questions, put them in the community tab, and I'll be sure to address them. With that, thank you, everybody. Take care.